weight was unbearable, not for most men, but for one man. A man whose name was not written in the stars, but carved, letter by letter, into the walls of history by the sheer force of pressure. Winston Churchill did not seek peace. He prepared for war, not just on the battlefield, but in the corridors of power, the trenches of doubt, and the silent war inside his own mind. Because greatness, real greatness, doesn't come from ease. It comes from compression. Pressure is not the enemy. It is the forge. It is the heat that melts the average and reforges the determined into legends. While others begged for relief, Churchill welcomed the fire, because he knew, deep in his bones, that the most powerful weapon in the world is a man who has been crushed by the burden and chose to rise anyway. He was not loved by all. He was not admired at first. They called him reckless. They called him washed up. They called him dangerous. But pressure has a way of making liars out of critics and giants out of the misunderstood. Churchill didn't need your belief. He didn't wait for applause. He turned rejection into resolve, and every insult, every doubt, every whispered dismissal, he stacked it like coal beneath his purpose. He burned it for fuel. When the storm came, he didn't flinch, he didn't run, he walked straight into it. Hat tilted forward, cigar lit like a torch through the darkness. He knew the truth, that history never bows to those who shrink from pressure. It only remembers those who became something under it. Most people collapse under pressure because they try to escape it. But Churchill knew pressure is not there to break you. It's there to reveal you. Strip away your comfort, strip away your image, strip away the illusion of certainty, and what's left? What remains when everything else is stripped away? Character, courage, conviction so heavy it could carry a nation across the blood-soaked fields of war. That is what Churchill had, not because he was born with it, but because he bled for it. Because pressure didn't just visit him, it made its home inside his soul. And instead of evicting it, he learned to live with it, to lead through it, to draw power from it. And now the question is not about Churchill. The question is about you. What will pressure do to you? Will you let it crush you, or will you let it crown you? Because the truth is, pressure doesn't care who you are. It will find you. It will weigh on your chest. It will ask the same brutal question it asked Churchill. What are you made of? Not what you say. Not what you post. Not what you tell the world when the lights are on. But what you become when the world goes dark. That's the difference. That's the moment. Most people pray for ease, but the legacy you crave, lives on the other side of pressure you've never dared face. Here is the next seamless 800-word continuation of your cinematic voiceover script. How Churchill turned pressure into power. Pressure is the test that history uses to sort the temporary from the timeless. When the bombs began falling over London, when the nights were long and the sky itself felt like it was bleeding, when mothers carried children into the underground, praying the roof held through morning, Churchill didn't blink. Because leadership under pressure doesn't look like shouting. It doesn't look like pointing fingers or hiding behind statistics. It looks like a man standing completely still while the world falls apart around him, and still commanding it to rise. Churchill didn't just survive pressure, he personified it. He became the immovable object in the face of unstoppable force. Not because he was fearless, but because he had one thing more powerful than fear: responsibility. He didn't see the role as a title. He saw it as a covenant, a sacred burden, a vow to withstand more than others could bear because the cost of collapse was unthinkable. And that is the rarest kind of strength, to endure not for yourself, but for those who no longer have the strength to carry on. That's why Churchill kept going when even his allies doubted him. That's why he held the line when his own cabinet flinched. Because when the weight of a nation pressed down on his shoulders, he didn't ask for it to stop. He tightened his jaw, he straightened his back, and he said, without a tremble, "We shall go on to the end." That's not just rhetoric. That's reprogramming the soul under siege. And you who were born into a different kind of war, a quieter one, must learn the same principle. When life gets heavy, when the pressure feels unbearable, you do not run. You expand. You become bigger than the pressure. Because pressure is just energy. And like any energy, it can be redirected, converted, transformed. Churchill turned fear into fuel. He turned national panic into personal power. He absorbed the collective chaos of millions and transmuted it into a single, unshakable directive: we will not break. That's what leaders do. They become the pressure valve, the furnace, the generator in the dark. They don't escape stress, they metabolize it. They don't suppress anxiety, they give it purpose. That's what you must do now, with the weight on your shoulders, with the deadline you can't meet, with the doubt clawing at your chest at 2 a.m. when everyone else is asleep. Don't shrink, expand. Don't numb it. Name it, own it, burn it. Turn your pressure into a platform. Let it teach you what comfort never could. Because comfort will lull you, but pressure will forge you and string. You think the great ones had it easy? Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times. Abraham Lincoln lost election after election before becoming a pillar of history. Henry Ford was mocked for chasing the impossible. Every one of them stood inside the fire and made diamonds out of discipline. But Churchill? He stood on the edge of annihilation. Not just political failure, but global extinction, and still declared with thunder, "Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, so that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour." That is what pressure can become when it is alchemized by purpose, not poison, not punishment, but power. The greatest tragedy is not that people are pressured, it's that they run from it before it transforms them. Pressure is the whisper behind every calling. It says there's more in you than you've dared to become. And Churchill listened to that voice. Even when it came dressed in sleepless nights, cigar smoke clouding a war room, paperwork dripping with the blood of decisions no man should make alone. He didn't drown in responsibility. He stood taller under it. Because once you realize that no one is coming to save you, you begin to become dangerous. You stop hoping for rescue. You stop waiting for reassurance. You stop begging for peace, and you learn to build power from pressure. It's not about what life gives you. It's about what you do with the weight in your chest when everything depends on your next decision. And Churchill knew this. Pressure is the price of destiny, not a punishment, but a privilege. When others folded under the tension, he built frameworks of steel in his mind. While bombs fell and buildings burned, his thoughts remained clear. His focus, razor sharp. He didn't just react, he responded. Like a general directing lightning, like a sculptor shaping fire. This wasn't instinct, it was training, mental training. Every speech he wrote, every enemy he faced, every failure, exile, betrayal, all of it forged in him the muscle memory of resilience. He didn't wait for clarity, he created it, in the noise, in the fog, in the pressure. Because the most powerful men in the world are not those who avoid the storm, they're the ones who become still inside of it. Churchill's mind became his fortress, unshakable, unbreakable, but not cold, not robotic. No, his strength came from feeling it all and still leading anyway. The heartbreak, the loss, the gravity of sending others to die while he stayed behind to carry their memory, the guilt that came with leadership, the whispers of self-doubt in the dead of night. He felt them all, but he never let them drive the wheel. You must learn that too. Pressure will speak, it will scream, it will demand you fold, but you must listen beyond it. You must find that voice deeper still, the one that doesn't panic, the one that doesn't shout, the one that simply says, you were made for this. That voice is the soul's signature. It's the coal that keeps burning when the rest of the world turns to ash. You don't develop it by accident. You develop it by repetition, by embracing the strain, by choosing again and again to walk through discomfort until discomfort becomes home, until pressure becomes permission to lead. This was Churchill's secret. He didn't see pressure as his enemy. He saw it as his evidence that he was standing exactly where he needed to be, that the moment mattered, that history was watching, and instead of flinching, he leaned in. He invited the weight. Because some men are broken by the world, and some men are built to carry it. He chose to carry it, and now the world remembers his name. The men who lead in times of peace are often celebrated, but the men who lead in times of chaos, they are the ones remembered forever. Because clarity under pressure is not a talent, it's a decision. And Churchill made it daily. He didn't guess, he didn't hesitate. While others debated in the fog, he planted his feet in the fire and made declarations that shaped the fate of nations. It wasn't luck, it was vision. Vision sharpened by war, exile, and the weight of consequence. Churchill didn't simply see what was, he saw what must be. And that made him terrifying, to his enemies and sometimes to his own allies. Because pressure makes cowards dream of comfort, but it makes visionaries dream bigger. He saw a Britain that would never bow. He saw a people who could rise from rubble and ruin and rebuild their spirit from ash. He saw a future where tyranny failed, not because it was weak, but because free men with fierce clarity refused to bend. And in that vision, he held the torch so high that millions found their way through darkness. That is leadership. That is pressure alchemized into light. But what gave him that power? Not perfection, not charm, not privilege. It was discipline. Discipline not just in routine, but in identity. Churchill didn't hope he would rise to the occasion. He prepared for it. He became the man before the moment arrived. Every hour in his study, every book read, every draft torn apart and rewritten, every lonely night in political exile. That was the preparation, because pressure doesn't care what you want. It exposes what you've built. And Churchill built steel into his soul long before he was called to lead a world at war. If you want to lead when it matters, you must train when it's quiet, when no one's watching, when there's no crowd, no applause. Only you, your doubts, and the weight you must learn to carry with grace and force. Discipline is doing what must be done, not when it's easy, but when your mind screams to escape. Churchill's discipline wasn't robotic. It was spiritual. He cultivated it like a soldier polishes his weapon, every day, because one day the fight will come. And when it does, you do not rise to the level of your ambition. You fall to the level of your training. That's what kept him steady in the war rooms. That's what kept his hand firm while signing declarations. That's what gave his voice weight when he said, "To each the chance to prove his worth upon the anvil of fate." Because to Churchill, fate wasn't some distant force. Fate was pressure, knocking at the door, asking, "Are you ready to become what the moment demands?" And his answer, every time, was yes. Not because he felt ready, but because he had trained his will to say yes anyway. The path to power is not paved with comfort. It's carved with conviction. And Churchill carved his in silence, in failure, in fire, until the pressure of the world could no longer break him. It could only build him. Let me know when you're ready to continue, and we'll move into the final emotional surge: gratitude, adaptability, resilience, and the legacy forged through pressure. Resilience isn't born in moments of ease. It's built in the shadow of collapse. And Churchill, he didn't just resist breaking. He became the man who could not be broken. Every headline predicting defeat, every sleepless night in Downing Street, every telegram delivering casualty counts too heavy for the soul, they were not nails in his coffin. They were bricks in the monument of his endurance. Because the essence of resilience is this: you absorb what would destroy other men, and you keep walking. He adapted, not by changing his convictions, but by deepening them. Pressure didn't bend his vision, it refined it, tuned it like a war drum, until every decision he made struck with clarity, force, and finality. That's the power of adaptive leadership, not changing who you are when the storm comes, but becoming more of who you must be. He didn't mourn normalcy. He led in the abnormal. He thrived in the chaos. Because resilience is not recovery. It's not bouncing back. It's building forward, with scars, with lessons, with fire still burning in your chest. And Churchill never saw himself as the hero. He saw himself as the servant of destiny, grateful not for comfort, but for the chance to stand between his people and the abyss. Gratitude not for ease, but for meaning. He was thankful for the weight, for the pressure, for the honor of bearing responsibility so heavy it would have crushed most men by sunrise. Because when you love something enough, you stop asking for it to be easy. You just ask for the strength to carry it. Churchill didn't worship success, he worshipped duty, and pressure became sacred under that duty. That's what made him dangerous. Not his intellect, not his speeches, but his capacity to carry what others feared to even face. So now we stand here, decades removed from bombs, from battlefields, from ration lines and blackout curtains. And yet pressure still lives. It has simply changed shape. It now arrives in quiet moments, deadlines, expectations, isolation. The voice inside telling you, you're not enough. But Churchill's story was never about war. It was about the will to face war without surrendering your soul. The world may not ask you to lead a nation, but it will ask you to lead yourself, to carry burdens, to face impossible odds, to lead when you're tired, to decide when you're scared, to stand up again, when no one claps, when no one calls your name, when no one sees the battle you're in. And in those moments, you will know this is your pressure, this is your forge, this is your finest hour. So, what is pressure really? It is not a punishment, it is a mirror, a moment where the world leans in and asks you, who are you really? It strips away your trophies, your reputation, your excuses, and leaves you standing naked in the furnace, face to face with the raw truth of what you're made of. Most retreat, but the few, the rare, the ones who history remembers, they rise, not because they're fearless, but because they've made a decision far greater than fear, to become necessary. Winston Churchill didn't seek to be admired. He sought to be of use. He made himself into the man the moment required. And so must you. This world doesn't need more comfort seekers. It doesn't need more perfection chasers. It doesn't need more people waiting for the weight to lift. It needs people who are willing to lift the weight. People who take the pressure and say, give me more, because I'm no longer afraid to be forged. The man who turned pressure into power didn't do it through ease. He did it through endurance, vision, conviction, and the unshakable belief that even in darkness, he would not kneel. And neither should you. Let every moment of stress become a stepping stone. Let every burden become your resistance training. Let every impossible task teach your mind what your will was always capable of. You are not here to avoid pressure. You are here to transform it. Turn it into focus. Turn it into strength. Turn it into the exact fuel the world will one day look back on and say, that was their finest hour. Because leadership is not about title or fame. It is about the quiet, brutal, beautiful decision to rise when every part of you wants to fall. Churchill made that decision again and again. Now the question is, will you? Not when it's easy, not when the timing is perfect, but now, right now, with the world pressing down, the doubts rising, and the pressure boiling in your chest. This is not the end. This is the beginning of your power. Take the pressure and build the legacy.